I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped outside and saw an old man sprawled across my dock, wearing nothing but faded swim trunks, a beer can resting lazily on his belly, and a half-eaten hot dog balancing precariously on his chest. His snoring echoed across the still water, a deep, guttural rumble that somehow felt like an insult to the peaceful morning I had planned. Beside him, two teenagers sat on overturned buckets, casting lines into the lake with my fishing gear. One of them, a scrappy-looking kid with a backwards cap, reeled in a fish with a satisfied grunt before casually tossing it back. The other, chewing loudly on a wad of gum, barely glanced up when I stormed toward them. "Excuse me," I barked, stopping just short of the dock. "This is my property." The old man barely cracked an eye open. "Karen said we could," he muttered, before letting out a long, slow exhale and turning over, his hot dog rolling off his chest and into the water with a soft plop. My hands clenched at my sides. Of course it was Karen. I had only lived in this neighborhood for a month, but that was plenty of time to realize that Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, had made it her personal mission to make my life hell. First, it was the passive-aggressive notes about my lawn height. Then, the reminders about garbage bin placement and driveway parking etiquette. She even had the nerve to show up at my door one evening with a printed schedule insisting I mow my grass on Thursdays to keep the community uniform. But this? Letting strangers use my dock like it was a public pier? That crossed the line. I turned on my heel and marched straight to her front door, my frustration building with every step. By the time I pounded on the door, I was practically vibrating with irritation. Karen answered with a smug, practiced smile, cradling a steaming mug that read HOA Boss Babe in glittery gold script. "I assume you're here about the dock," she said sweetly. "You gave away my property," I snapped. "That's not how this works." "Oh, but it is," she cooed, setting her mug down and reaching for a thick, color-coded binder, the kind only people who take HOA meetings way too seriously would own. She flipped to a highlighted page, tapped her manicured nail against some vague clause about communal recreational use, and grinned like she had just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. "That doesn't even make sense," I argued. "It's my dock. I paid for it. I maintain it. And I am liable if anything happens." Karen gave a delicate shrug, the picture of practiced indifference. "Well," she said, smile widening, "you're welcome to bring it up at the next HOA meeting. I'm sure we'll get it resolved, eventually." And just like that, she shut the door in my face. I stood there for a long second, staring at the peeling wreath on her front door, before turning back toward my house, seething. If Karen thought this was over, she was dead wrong. The next few weeks felt like living in a public park that I somehow still had to pay property taxes on. My dock had become a free-for-all, a neighborhood hotspot where I was the uninvited guest. Every day, new faces strolled across my yard like they owned the place, kids sprinting across the grass with dripping popsicles, sunburned dads lugging overstuffed coolers, even a couple of teenagers blasting music as they did cannonballs off my dock. And Karen? She was living for it. Every time I caught her watching from her front porch, she had that same smug expression, sipping her coffee like a queen surveying her kingdom. Then, one morning, I stepped outside and stopped dead. My dock was a disaster zone. Empty beer cans rolled between cigarette butts, soggy paper plates floated in the shallows, and the remains of a burnt-out charcoal grill sat right in the middle of the planks. But the worst part? Someone had scratched a message into the side of my brand-new boat, 3 deep, jagged words that sent my blood pressure skyrocketing. HOA rules. I saw red. That night, as I sat on my deck, glaring at the dock like it had personally betrayed me, I realized something. I couldn't win against Karen with complaints. I couldn't win with logic, because logic had no place in an HOA dictatorship. If I wanted my dock back, I had to out Karen. The next morning, I made a few calls. By noon, a security specialist was installing a state-of-the-art Keycard access system on my dock's entrance, one that logged every entry, had remote access, and even sent alerts to my phone. It was sleek, secure, and most importantly, 100% under my control. But I wasn't stopping there. I spent the next afternoon printing glossy membership cards with Dock Access Pass stamped in bold, gold lettering. Then, I posted an official-looking notice on the community bulletin board. Exclusive dock memberships now available. Premium seating and shade. Fishing gear storage. High-speed Wi-Fi access. Limited spots, act fast. Monthly fee, $50. It was part petty revenge, part genius business move. I figured no one would actually sign up, I just wanted to make a point. But then, something unexpected happened. People actually lined up. Within 2 days, I had neighbors asking where they could sign up. Apparently, some folks were just as sick of the chaos as I was and liked the idea of an exclusive, well-maintained dock. One guy even asked if he could host his wedding proposal there. By the end of the week, I wasn't just regaining control of my dock, I was making a profit. But Karen? Oh, she was livid. I spotted her storming toward me one afternoon, her face red, clutching a clipboard like a weapon. "This is outrageous," she snapped, jabbing a finger at my newly installed gate. "You're exploiting the community." I barely held back my grin. "No," I said, calmly scanning my keycard and stepping onto my dock. "I'm charging for what's mine." "Big difference." Karen's hands tightened into fists. "You can't just lock people out of a public lake." "I'm not," I said. "The lake is public. My dock is not." She sputtered, opening and closing her mouth like a fish gasping for air. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. And for once, I actually believed her. That night, I got my first security alert. Someone had tampered with the keycard system, ripping out wires, trying to force it open. A single sticky note had been left behind, taped to the gate. "You can't lock down the lake." The handwriting looked suspiciously familiar. I reinforced the system, adding motion-activated lights and an upgraded lock. But 2 nights later, my phone buzzed again. I pulled up the camera feed, and nearly dropped my phone laughing. Karen. Wrapped in a ridiculous floral robe, holding a screwdriver, jabbing furiously at the control panel like she thought it would magically pop open. And then, the emergency lock engaged. I had forgotten about that feature, a failsafe that automatically sealed the gate when tampering was detected. Karen was trapped on my dock. She paced back and forth, cursing under her breath, her robe flapping dramatically in the wind like some kind of villainous supercape. I could have gone down immediately. Could have let her out. But I didn't. I let her marinate in her own stubbornness for a while longer. By the time I finally strolled down, coffee in hand, she was shivering, wet from the lake spray, and furious. "You good?" I asked, barely hiding my amusement. She shot me a murderous glare. "I slipped," she snapped. "I was checking for damage." "Sure you were," I said, scanning my card and unlocking the gate. "Next time, just ask if you want a membership card." Her entire face flushed red, but she didn't say another word. She just stormed back toward her house, fists clenched, practically vibrating with rage. I should have been satisfied. Should have considered that the final victory. But as I watched Karen stomp away, her back rigid with barely contained fury, I knew the truth. This wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to back down quietly. And I had just made her very, very determined. The next morning, I stepped outside expecting to bask in the glory of my secured, problem-free dock. Instead, I found something far worse, a storm brewing in the form of whispers. At first, I didn't pay attention. A few passing glances at the local diner, a hushed conversation that stopped when I walked by at the gas station. But then, the rumors started getting back to me. Apparently, I wasn't just charging for dock access anymore. No, according to Karen's version of events, I had turned my dock into some kind of elite, overpriced country club. Word on the street was that I was demanding ridiculous fees, banning families, and even refusing to let veterans fish. One neighbor even asked me, in all seriousness, if it was true that I was planning to turn the lakefront into a members-only resort. It was absurd. And infuriating. But what really set me off was what happened later that day. I had just pulled into the driveway when I noticed something strange on my dock. From a distance, it almost looked like trash bags. No. A pile of wet clothes? Closer. Then I saw it. A mound of rotting, stinking, dead fish. Some petty, miserable excuse for a person had dumped an entire sack of decomposing fish guts right onto my dock. The stench hit me before I even reached the shore, thick, putrid, soaking into the planks in a way that would take days to scrub out. I didn't need a detective to know who was behind it. I spent the next few hours furiously cleaning, but my patience was gone. This wasn't about a dock anymore. Karen wasn't just trying to reclaim some imagined public space. She wanted me gone. I thought about confronting her. Marching up to her door and demanding she admit what she had done. But I knew how that would go. Karen never directly got her hands dirty, she always had a plausible excuse, an alibi, a smug little smirk that said, "Prove it." So instead, I doubled down. I expanded the dock's features, added more lounge chairs, a mini fridge for members, solar-powered lights for nighttime ambience. If she wanted a war, I was going to win it with style. But then, Karen escalated again. One evening, as I sipped a well-earned beer on my deck, I spotted her standing by her window, watching me. Her face twisted in frustration, like she couldn't decide whether to scream or cry. I raised my bottle in a toast. She yanked her blinds shut so fast they nearly tore off the window. That should have been my warning. The next morning, before dawn, my phone buzzed with an alert. My security system had detected movement. Bleary-eyed, I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed. Karen. Again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Two of her HOA cronies, Linda and Cheryl, were with her, dragging what looked like extension cords and a power drill. They crouched near the dock's Keycard system, whispering frantically, jabbing at the wiring like they were disarming a bomb. I almost felt bad for them. Almost. Then, click. The emergency lock engaged. 3 HOA members. Trapped on my dock. Linda and Cheryl freaked out first, rattling the gate like caged animals. Karen, however, remained perfectly still, glaring up at the security camera like she could burn through it with sheer willpower. I took my time getting dressed before heading outside. By the time I reached the dock, they were huddled in the corner, shivering from the cold morning air. Karen snapped first. "This ridiculous system of yours malfunctioned." "Oh, I don't know," I said, innocently tapping my keycard against the scanner. "Seems to be working just fine." She stepped forward, her robe still damp from the lake spray. "You can't keep locking people out like this." "I'm not locking anyone out," I said, unlocking the gate. "People are just paying for what's fair. Membership has its privileges." Her eyes narrowed. "You're exploiting the community." "Funny," I said. "I thought I was protecting my property." Karen stormed past me, dragging her equally humiliated accomplices with her. But just before she reached the street, one of them leaned in and whispered something to her. Karen's face twisted into a grin. That worried me more than anything else. Because I knew what that look meant. She had another plan. And sure enough, 2 days later, I found out what it was. A notice appeared in my mailbox. An emergency HOA meeting. Agenda, Jack's unfair dock restrictions and monopolization of communal space. Karen had convinced the HOA board to hold a vote on whether my dock should be declared community property. If she won, my entire dock would be stripped from me, legally. This wasn't just sabotage anymore. Karen was trying to take everything. The HOA meeting was set for Friday evening, and by the time I arrived at the community center, the tension in the air was palpable. The place was packed. Half the neighborhood had shown up, and from the murmurs around the room, Karen's propaganda had done its job well. I spotted her immediately, standing near the front with her ever-present clipboard, radiating smug confidence. She was chatting with Linda and Cheryl, the same two who had been caught on my dock days ago, now standing tall like nothing had happened. If they were embarrassed by their little late-night sabotage attempt, they certainly weren't showing it. Karen locked eyes with me and smiled. Not a friendly smile, a victory grin, the kind you give someone right before you rip the rug out from under them. I took a seat and waited. The meeting kicked off with the usual HOA nonsense, budget updates, a reminder about holiday decorations needing to be tasteful and uniform. Then, finally, Karen took the floor. She stepped up, flipping through her clipboard like a lawyer preparing for trial. "Neighbors," she began, her voice syrupy sweet, "we have gathered here today to address a growing concern in our community." I already felt the headache forming. "For years," she continued, "our lake has been a symbol of unity, a place where families can gather, where children can fish, where we can all enjoy the beauty of nature together." She sighed, placing a dramatic hand over her heart. "But recently, that has changed. One of our neighbors has decided to turn a public resource into a personal money-making scheme." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen turned, her eyes locking onto mine. "Jack," she said, tilting her head in fake sympathy, "has placed a barrier between us and our beloved lake. He has denied families access, turned children away, and is charging outrageous fees just to set foot on what was once shared by all." I nearly laughed out loud. The sheer audacity. But she wasn't done. She pulled out a stack of papers, a petition, supposedly signed by residents who supported her motion to declare my dock community property. The crowd started to shift. People were nodding, whispering, shooting me accusatory glances. Then, Karen delivered her final blow. "We are a community," she said, voice dripping with manufactured sincerity. "We look out for one another. And I know, deep in my heart, I know that we can come together to stop this injustice." The room broke into scattered applause. I exhaled slowly, standing up. "Are you done?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Karen folded her arms. "Unless you have a reasonable defense," she said, "I think the facts speak for themselves." I nodded. "Great. Let's talk about facts." I pulled out my phone and, without another word, cast my screen onto the room's projector. The video played. Karen and her friends sneaking onto my dock at night. Tampering with my security system. Getting trapped and blaming me. Then, another clip. Karen selling fake dock memberships behind my back. The room erupted. Gasps. Some laughing outright. Even a few of Karen's supposed supporters looked away, clearly embarrassed to be associated with her. I let the silence sit for a moment before speaking. "I never restricted access to the lake," I said. "I restricted access to my property. The only reason I even installed a system was because Karen decided my dock was some kind of community pool." I pointed to her clipboard. "And as for that petition? I'm willing to bet most of the people on that list had no idea what they were signing." Karen's face twisted. "You're done," I cut in. The HOA president stood up. He looked frustrated, not at me, but at the circus Karen had turned this into. "We've seen enough," he said, rubbing his temples. "All in favor of Karen's motion to make Jack's dock community property?" A handful of hands went up. Then, he asked, all opposed. Nearly every hand in the room shot into the air. The vote wasn't even close. Karen stood there, stunned. The clipboard in her hands trembled slightly, her knuckles turning white as she squeezed it. She couldn't believe she had lost. I walked past her on my way out, pausing just long enough to whisper, "Next time, maybe don't start a war you can't win." I should have left it there. But I couldn't resist. The next morning, I had a special delivery sent to Karen's house. A Platinum Doc membership card. With her name on it. And just for her? Twice the price. I thought that after the HOA vote, Karen would finally accept her loss and move on. I should have known better. If there was one thing Karen hated more than losing, it was admitting defeat. And sure enough, just days later, she unveiled her last, desperate attempt at revenge. One morning, as I was enjoying a peaceful cup of coffee on my deck, I heard the unmistakable sound of power tools whining from Karen's property. At first, I assumed it was some routine home improvement project, until I caught sight of what she was building. A dock. Or, at least, something vaguely resembling one. Karen had constructed a rickety, uneven mess of wooden planks that extended from her yard and, unsurprisingly, encroached dangerously close to mine. It wasn't illegal, technically, but it was as petty as it was ridiculous. The first day, she made a big show of lounging on it, oversized sunglasses on, sipping some obnoxious pink drink like she was at a five-star resort. The next day, she invited half the neighborhood. Within hours, her new, community dock turned into a loud, chaotic party zone. Music blared, kids jumped into the water, and, of course, beer cans and trash conveniently ended up floating toward my dock. But Karen wasn't done yet. That night, my security system pinged me again. I checked my phone, and there she was. Karen. Back on my dock. This time, she wasn't alone. She brought tools. As I watched the live feed, she crouched near the gate, yanking at the wiring with a pair of bolt cutters, whispering to herself like some kind of cartoon villain. She must have thought that by destroying the Keycard system, she could finally reclaim my dock. Too bad for her, I had a backup plan. I reached for my phone and, with one tap, activated my surprise. A high-powered sprinkler system erupted to life, blasting Karen and her accomplices with ice-cold water. Screams rang through the night as they stumbled, slipping and soaking wet, scrambling off the dock like startled raccoons. And the best part? I had it all on camera. By morning, I had already sent the footage to the HOA board. Within hours, Karen was hit with multiple violations, trespassing, property damage, and reckless behavior. Her dock, poorly built and already falling apart, was declared unsafe and ordered to be removed. For the first time since this ridiculous war began, Karen finally backed down. A week later, she showed up at my door, holding something in her hand. My smashed Keycard scanner, repaired. She didn't say much, just muttered, "Here. I paid someone to fix it." I raised an eyebrow. "You know," I said, "you could have just asked for a membership." She glared but didn't argue. "I'm not paying for your stupid dock." I smirked. "That's fine. I already reserved a platinum membership for you, double the price." Karen huffed and stormed off, but for the first time, I caught a hint of a smirk on her face. That weekend, I saw her sitting on the remnants of her collapsing dock, quietly fishing. No friends, no party, just her and the water. After a while, I walked down to my own dock, tapped my phone, and unlocked the gate. "You wanna fish?" I called across the yard. "You can use mine if you want." She glanced over, looking surprised. There was a long pause before she grabbed her tackle box and made her way over. Karen never admitted I had one, and I never expected her to. But as we sat there, lines bobbing in the water, I realized something. Victory doesn't always mean crushing your opponent. Sometimes, it just means proving you were right all along. And, of course, still charging her double. Have you ever had to deal with an impossible HOA or a Karen in your neighborhood? Share your experiences below. Let's see who had it worse.